Hello, everyone. We are again every Friday at 8 p.m. Moroccan local time. And every week we invite very special guest speakers. Tonight, it's our honor to welcome and to host one of the best guest speakers here in Morocco, two professors teaching at two different universities. So before we get started, let me first introduce our guest speakers, then we get started. So Mr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI holds a doctorate degree in EFL and Evaluation of Education Systems and a master's degree in Applied Linguistics from University Mohammed V, Faculty of Education Sciences in Rabat. At present, he is an associate professor of business English and research methodology at the National School of Business Management, NCG, University Hassan I. He also taught English in high schools and prep classes for more than 12 years. Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI has also gotten a European degree in coaching and professional development from the Coaching de Paris. His doctoral thesis focused on the social psychology of university, EFL learners' success, failure, and dropout. He has published research papers in cognitive psychology, learners' motivation, and critical thinking skills. He has participated as a speaker in many conferences in Morocco and abroad, and given presentations in various fields, such as independent and autonomous learning, teaching thinking skills and creativity, and promoting risk-taking in future entrepreneurs. Wonderful topics, by the way, Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI. He has recently founded Africa Voices Dialogue, an NPO that tries to contribute to the improvement of education in the African continent. Wow, what a great profile, Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI. It's our pleasure to host you with us today.
Thank you so much, Lhoussine.
Wonderful. And his topic will be about the 21st century skills, building learners' capacity. Very interesting topic again. Thank you again, Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Next, there is a female leader. She is SAKALE. He is currently assistant professor in the Faculty of Letters, Languages, and Arts Ibn Tofail University, Kenitra, Morocco, where she teaches different subjects related to English studies in general. She has an experience of 20 years in class. Wow, long experience. She previously had the chance to teach at ESL, English as a second language teacher in Worcester, Boston, Mass. She holds a master's degree in feminism from the Faculty of Humanities and a doctorate degree from the Faculty of Sciences of Education, situated both in Rabat. She is a member of the Laboratory Language and Society, composed of different research groups pertaining to the study of languages, didactics, culture, variation. She has published a number of empirical studies related to the speaking skill in Moroccan EFL high school context. Her book entitled Theoretical Controversies as to Or Activity, a synthetic analysis of the Moroccan context, is under publication. Thank you, Dr. SAKALE, for accepting our invitation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And her title will be about or on pedagogical tasks in Moroccan high schools, an overview by Prof. SAKALE. Wonderful. And I'm sure our international audience will learn and enjoy your presentations. Okay, and you have a very interesting profile. And again, GBF is very glad, and it's our honor to welcome you and to have you here with us to share your skills and knowledge, expertise in topics related to English language teaching. Thank you, Mr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lhoussine. I would like to thank the Global Bus Foundation for the invitation, and I would like to thank everyone who is attending with us, either through Zoom or through Facebook. I would like to also say hi to all my friends and everybody who knows me in person, and everyone who is attending, as I said. Can I share now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for the efforts you're making. You're making great efforts to share learning and knowledge with everyone in a very special way. By the way, just one clarification. You said I founded because maybe I made a mistake when I sent you my bio. I co-founded Africa Voices Dialogue with two great friends, Dr. Robin Whitaker from South Africa and Professor Andrew from Kenya. So the three of us co-founded this NPO or non-profit organization, and we welcome everyone to join us in trying to promote education and learn from each other and build learning communities. Well, the topic of today that I chose it because I really
Can you please activate your mic, please?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I said that I chose it because I have some personal attachment to this topic, because I feel that we need to know, every one of us need to know about what 21st century skills are about, and not just know them. Maybe a lot of people know them, but we just need to create the appropriate connections so that we know what we should do and how to promote them. So today, I'm not going to maybe talk about something new. I'm not going to really dig deep and define what 21st century skills are. I'm going to say what these 21st century skills are, but we need to maybe have other sessions so that we can have maybe either workshops on some of these 21st century skills, or debates, or other presentations if you want. So about the outline first, what does the 21st century look like? Because it's part of what we're going to talk about. Why do we need to build learners' capacity? Because it's in the title, as you have seen. What are the 21st century skills? What are these skills, and why they are important? And what should be done to shift the pendulum towards 21st? It's not second, but it's 21st century skills. I'm sorry for the spelling mistake. So now the 21st century has been defined in the literature in many ways, especially with what we are going through nowadays, especially with the crisis that have hit the world in the recent years. But some of the ideas we need to know about this 21st century, as you can see from the words that you see on the slide, or the pictures that you see that I've shared, the word change is very important, and it's really important to understand what type of change we are going through in the 21st century, because we can say that change itself has changed. So the change that we had in the previous centuries is not the same as the change we have now. It is very rapid, very velocious, and it requires a different way of dealing with this change, different perspective, different paradigms, if we can say that. So today, we describe the times we are going through as VUCA times. And VUCA, as you can see, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And these times are special and need special treatment. So we have to deal with them in a special way. So we need new skills. We need to either develop new skills or build on some of the skills that we already have, build on them to make ourselves ready for the change. Then this century is marked by the fourth industrial revolution, seeing changes in IoT, or what we call the Internet of Things, seeing changes that happen due to artificial intelligence and technology and how it is impacting our world. Of course, we cannot use the same skills we had, or we built, or we developed, or we taught in previous years. to deal with a world such as this one. Of course, data is the new oil. We are shifting towards a different type of energy, different types of energies, and at the same time, different ways of getting these energies and processing them and analyzing them. And that require specific skills. It is a world known as the knowledge economy. So we have to understand what this knowledge economy is about and what types of competencies do we need to thrive and be able to compete and at the same time survive and be fitting within this knowledge economy. Now, why building capacity? Well, the word capacity, of course, is very important, especially when it comes to these VUCA times that we have talked about, or what is also called weak times. The COVID-19 era is called a wicked era, like financial crises that the world has undergone recently. Capacity is important. Building capacity is important at all levels, not just students' capacity, but as you can see, Plato said the purpose of education is to give the body and to the soul all the beauty and all the perfection of which they are capable. That means that students are capable, they have capacities. We cannot say that they don't have capacities. Well, maybe we need to develop. Building means building on the capacities that they have and develop more capacity so that they can be ready for change. When you look at the equilibrium, creating the balance for success requires what? It requires weighing capacities against challenges. If the challenges of the world today outweigh the capacities that we have, we're going to have problems. That's why we have to build these capacities and be capable to face up to the challenges that we have. That's how we define success. Success is defined through the equilibrium or the balance between capacities and challenges. So if the challenges change, of course, you have to change your capacities too. And you have to build more capacities to face those challenges. Now, Sai Baba said, education today does not impart to the students the capacity or grit to face the challenges of daily life. The educational field has become the playing ground of ignorance. That's why capacity is important. Now, of course, in order to do this, one of the first things we need to do is to shift paradigms about a number of things. And shifting paradigms means shifting the lenses, or the way we see things. That's what a paradigm means. It's how we see or how we perceive things. So the way we perceive at least these three things when it comes to education, they're very important. There is more than this, but these three let's say components are so important. So the way we see learning, how we define it. Of course, today it is said that learning should not be, and teaching at the same time, should not be about teaching and learning what things are, about things. So instead of teaching students about things and make them learn about many things, you know, that we have them at a click of a finger right now, as they say, we have to teach them how to think about things. So instead of teaching them what, we teach them how to think about the things that they have or the things that they see in the world. So that's one of the things we need to do, shift that paradigm, not just focus on learner-centered education. We have to go deeper into questioning a number of issues. For example, the relationship between the teacher and the learner, what type of power, the power dynamics that exist in the educational sector, even at the level of education policy and decision making, who is making policy, what type of processes are used in order to analyze, to make policies and to make decisions at the level of education, whether there are, for example, considerations about involvement, inclusiveness of every stakeholder. So these are some of the issues we need to consider. Now, what are those 21st century skills? Now, these 21st century skills, I ran into them or came across them doing research about thinking skills. Of course, I've done research paper, as you have mentioned, maybe with Professor Bouziane and Professor Hassan on teaching critical thinking skills and teaching higher order thinking skills, by the way, that are very, very important. I advise all educators to give maybe more consideration to teaching higher order thinking skills, or at least to introduce them in their classes and talk about them and see how they can develop them. But if we look at a report by the World Economic Forum that has done research on how students of the 21st century can be, let's say, helped to deal with the challenges of today, of the world today, we can see that they have come up with three types of skills. Now, the first part on the left, where you have foundational literacies here, we may say that all types of schools, all schools around the world teach these. They teach literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy, financial literacy, cultural and civic literacy. All students get these types of skills. So that's how students apply core skills to everyday tasks. That's what we learn at schools, yes. And then we have the 4 C's that are generally today, everybody talks about the four C's. And these are competencies that are important, and they can help students approach complex challenges. So we have critical thinking, problem solving. I have talked about higher order thinking skills versus lower order thinking skills, using, of course, Bloom's taxonomy, if you want to dig deeper into it. Creativity is very, very important, highly important to develop in students in the world of today, and integrating technology, but of course, using technology for the sake of developing learning, not just using technology for the sake of using technology, is important, and building creativity is important. Communication is also important. Collaboration is also important. For me, what I want to focus more on are these skills which build character, or what are called character qualities, or how students approach their challenging and changing environment. It is a changing environment, it is a challenging environment. And these are hugely important. Of course, we think about the way we criticize our students today, albeit we sometimes overgeneralize, let's say, because we do have some very, very good students, and we have others who are struggling, and the problem is that sometimes we don't really understand why they are struggling. So maybe we need to move towards, not towards making judgments, but towards understanding. But still, we have problems. And one of the problems, it can be explained through focus on the first skill here, number 11, which is curiosity. And if we maybe zoom into or move into the skills developed by the UNESCO, as you see here, curiosity is related to global vision. So it is believed that if students today want to succeed and thrive in the world we have today, which is a diverse, very diverse world, yes, and it is a changing world, and it is moving very, very fast, and it has a number of elements that contribute to this change. Students need to develop curiosity to know everything about this world. And of course, we say today that students have to, for example, watch the news, read more, and at the same time think about the different issues around them. So we need to build students' curiosity, and at least talk to them about the importance of curiosity today. Taking initiative is very, very important. And I can take the example of COVID-19. You have seen that the people who helped the world go through the crisis and overcome it, we have not overcome it yet, but at least we have been able to survive, let's say. These are people who took initiative. They took initiative, they took risk, they created new things. And we have talked about Morocco at the beginning of this COVID. We said that Moroccans have shown some grit and some initiative, which is good. So that's why it is an important skill to develop. So persistence and grit are important, because in VUCA times, which are complex, uncertain, and confusing, and challenging, and complex, people may lose resilience. And resilience is very, very important to survive today. So persistence is very important, and grit is very important. Adaptability, we know why adaptability is important. As the world changes very fast, so your skill to adapt to the world and to maybe use new techniques and new ways of seeing the world can help you adapt to the change and move faster with the change. Now, leadership is a huge issue, yes, and it requires reading a lot to understand what leadership is and to see how different types of leadership can contribute to facing the change of the world today. For example, everybody today talks about transformative leadership and leadership, or serving leadership or servant leadership, as leaders become servants of their societies and of their communities, helping the communities to thrive and to succeed. And leadership is very, very important. At least explaining to students the different levels of leadership, for example, and how they differ, as John Maxwell does, for instance, moving from the leadership of position, where your position gives you leadership, to the leadership of a saga, or when you leave some achievements behind you, and so that people can follow you for who you are, not for what position you hold. These are a few examples that at least explain, but that's not enough, as I said. Now, there is social and cultural awareness. It is very, very important. If we look at the skill here, collective identity, so being aware of who you are and what you represent and what the world around you is made of, for example, is very important. Because, for example, if we want the world today to live in peace, we, as one of the Indian gurus said, we need to provide students or people in general with a global identity before we provide them with an education. And that's why you see that collective identity here as a skill or competence is put on the top. And there are other skills that you can see here that we can share later that are also very important. But as I said, these skills here that build character are very, very important and should be integrated. And as you see here, the most important thing in all this image here is lifelong learning. So if we provide learners with these three types of skills, and especially, as I said, those skills here with the skills that we have here, we are helping them learn for life. And you know why learning for life, or why developing lifelong learning has become indispensable today. As I said, because the world is changing very fast and we need to adapt. And the best way we can adapt, or maybe the only way we can adapt, is to learn. So when we stop learning, we will stop to adapt, and we will stop to move with the change. So we will not, let's say, move ahead of the curve, because that's what innovation is about. Yes, it's about moving ahead of the curve. When we talk about innovation in its global sense, in its larger meaning, not just the meaning of innovating in terms of machines and technology and so on and so forth, even in terms of building your own character in an innovative way. So we need to learn for life. We should never stop learning. That's why we have lifelong learning here in this image. Now, what needs to be done to integrate these 21st century skills? One of the most important things that we need to do is align curricula in all schools at all levels with 21st century skills, because as I said, there are many reports about these 21st century skills, and we can even look at them with some critical perspective if we want, but we need at least to align curricula with 21st century skills, because as I said, they are very, very important. We need to integrate these skills at all levels of teaching, and there are ways now. If you ask me, the internet is fraught with resources about how to develop these 21st century skills at different levels, even at middle school levels, let's say, and even at elementary schools. How there are resources, there are activities that are shared online, and if anyone wants to have some resources, they can get in touch with me, and I can I can at least share with them a few resources about teaching 21st century skills, or what some might call soft skills. We'll get to this. Then explicitly introduce, develop, and teach 21st century skills. Explicitly, it means one thing. Well, this is something I've been thinking about forever. We as professors, we get trained on learning and developing skills. For example, many professors and teachers and educators have learned Bloom's taxonomy, but very, very few teachers talk to their students about Bloom's taxonomy. You're going to ask me, how do I know? Because I did research about it. And because every year I ask all the students that I have whether they have heard of higher order thinking skills. And up to now, I haven't heard a positive answer from any student. So I think that's why it's important to explicitly introduce these 21st century skills and develop them and teach them explicitly. That is to say, talk to the students about the importance of, for example, Bloom's taxonomy, why Bloom developed his taxonomy, how he has developed it. Talk to them about those 21st century skills that develop character. What do they mean? Why they are very important? How they can be developed, and so on and so forth. Then we need to build educators and teachers. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So we need to build educators and teachers' capacity, because if we want to build learners' capacity, we need to build the capacity of those who are going to help us build the capacity of learners. And this is obvious, it is self-evident. Then we need to draw on a range of alternative assessment strategies to evaluate learners' performance. I know that there is a huge debate around the way we evaluate students today, about grading and so on and so forth, whether it is still relevant in the world today or not. I'm not going to get into this debate, but even if it's still relevant, we need to vary the way we evaluate students. We cannot evaluate all students in the same way. We cannot evaluate all subjects in the same way. So drawing on a range of alternative assessment strategies to evaluate learners' performance and to evaluate learners' learning of the 21st century skills is a must today. And we have to get together as researchers and educators to build ways and alternative assessment strategies and techniques to evaluate this performance. Then environments need to be created that support and facilitate the integration of these skills in education, all types of environments. We're not going to talk about budgets, of course. We know that financial support and budgets are hugely important. I just don't want to get into it because it's not something we can control. As educators, researchers, and teachers, what we can control a number of things that I have mentioned here. There are other things that we do not control. Of course, they are very important, but does not mean that we are going to just do nothing about it until we get the right budgeting and the right and enough money and the ideal environment. And you know that if we wait for that, we are going to wait for a long time. Now, one of the things that we need to build in learners to help them build these capacities is to, I think I have already talked about this when I talked about Bloom's taxonomy. I gave the example of higher order thinking skills. We need also to learn to teach learners how to learn. One of the ways to do this is first to build their awareness about the way they learn. So one of the things we can develop in students, if we want them to develop awareness about who they are and awareness about how they learn and awareness about how they also view the world and awareness, for example, about how they perceive success and failure. One of the skills we have to teach is and develop is locus of control. And what locus of control means, it means where do you locate the causes of your success and failure and of what happens to you? Where do you locate them? Where do you locate those causes? Do you locate those causes as internal causes that come from within you? Is to say, for example, if you attribute your failure and success to effort, so you are attributing you have an internal locus of control. We call it based on Weiner's causal attribution theory. We attribute failure to effort, so we're using an internal locus of control. And internal locus of control is very, very important because it helps you make more efforts and see how you can control your failure and success and believe that you are in control and make more efforts and succeed. While having an external locus of control, that is to say, attributing what happens to an external cause. In Morocco, we always use the example of مشاريع الطوبيس. Now we are invited by the Global Bus Foundation, so we can use the example of the bus. So مشاريع الطوبيس, instead of saying I missed the bus, we say we say the bus, I don't know, the bus has gone, instead of saying I missed the bus. Yes. So that's one way of having an external locus of control, that is to say, attributing or imputing, to use words from the causal attribution theory, attributing what happens to you to an external cause. Then we have to develop a growth mindset. You see the picture here. So the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is about feeling that you have freedom, okay? Yeah, freedom of choice, freedom of impacting your future, and so on and so forth. And we need to, well, of course, this freedom, and we all talk about freedom of choice when it comes to teaching and learning. Also in the as I talked about the power dynamic, the relationship between the professors and the students, and the relationship between the professors and the policymakers, we have to review and revisit this power dynamic, of course. That is to say, giving learners more freedom of choice, because freedom comes with responsibility. Yes. So you are building the responsibility. Responsibility is, of course, one of the most important skills in soft skills. When we talk about soft skills, we can list a number of soft skills if you want, such as integrity, such as honesty, such as responsibility. Professionalism is an important soft skill, and we can talk about them forever because there is no limited list of soft skills, of course. But the skills we are talking about here are very important because they make people learn how to learn and at the same time control their own learning. And we want learners to feel that they have control over their own learning and at the same time practice this control, because that's what will lead them to learn for life. And we can have the example of why, for example, a lot of people, when they quit school, they stop reading or they stop learning. That's because they have never reflected on this idea, the concept of learning to learn, and the concept of learning for life, and developing this growth mindset. So preserving in the face of failure, persevering, sorry, in the face of failure. We talked about persistence and grit, and that's part of growth, a growth mindset, a mindset that is geared towards growing, not fixed mindset. That is a mindset that is limiting and limiting, yes? So a fixed mindset is limiting, while a growth mindset provides you with freedom, because you see effort as a precursor to building new skills, as I said. So that's part of the locus of control, the internal locus of control I talked about. Then finding inspiration in other success instead of envying other success, or feeling threatened by other success, as you see in the fixed mindset. So having that feeling that someone's success is an inspiration instead of seeing someone's success as a threat. And of course, we all know that this is very, very important for the positive change we want. And there are others, of course, like embracing challenges, accepting criticism, desiring to learn instead of ignoring feedback. Yes, because feedback is important. So seeing feedback as an important contribution to your own learning, instead of seeing it as a threat, or building those defensive mechanisms that people build when they hear something about them, especially negative feedback. And at the same time, building abilities instead of feeling that you have reached a threshold and you are unable to build abilities. That's about the growth mindset. Of course, there is self-determination. It's a theory that was developed by Ditchy and Ryan, and you can find it online. You can learn about it. But what is important about self-determination is about the feeling of autonomy, developing autonomy, autonomous learning, and at the same time feeling controlling your own learning. So, and at the same time feeling a sense of belonging, developing interest in learning. That is to say, instead of focusing on external motivation, you focus on internal motivation. So, and at the same time, even seeing if something external motivates you, you are trying to appropriate it as internal, because it becomes a motive, it becomes an incentive to learn. Developing self-efficacy skills based on self-efficacy theory by Robert Bandura is also important to learn about. It's a skill that gives students, well, we may talk about confidence, but it's not just confidence. It's the belief that you are capable of carrying out tasks in an effective way. That's what self-efficacy is about. That is to say, believing in your efficacious skills and believing in yourself as an effective performance. Self-regulated learning skills are important because they help you regulate your own learning. That is to say, monitor yourself, manage yourself in order to manage your learning, and being able to monitor whether you are doing what you should be doing to learn better or not. Now, teacher training in all this is key because, as I said, we talked about building capacity, learners' capacity, but the challenge facing education, as said by Arthur Levin, the challenge facing education schools is not to do a better job at what they are already doing, but to do a fundamentally different job. So they are now in the business of preparing educators for a new world. We know that we have struggled lately in Morocco with teacher education for all the reasons you know in Morocco. We need to review and I think revisit and have a paradigm shift when it comes to teacher training, and develop the capacities of these new teachers instead of just judging them, instead of just criticizing the way they do things. And we need to develop their capacity. And developing teachers' capacity or teacher training should not be limited to training prior to the becoming a teacher, but also in-service training is very, very important. So this is the responsibility of all educators and all teachers. So a new teacher, for example, or not even a new, not just new teachers. Every teacher who needs to be trained should be trained by everyone who is ready, who has this readiness, including the colleagues. So this, collaboration between colleagues, between teachers, something that I feel, it's just a personal feeling. I don't know if it's true or not. We haven't done research about it, but I feel that we lack it nowadays. There isn't enough collaboration between teachers in our domain as there used to be before. And as I said, this is just a feeling. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if others share the same feeling with me or not. Now, we end with two slides. This is food for thought. John Dewey, everybody who is interested in education knows what John Dewey stands for and how he has contributed to teaching and to the philosophy of education. He said, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And of course, we don't want to rob them of tomorrow because we want to live with them in this tomorrow. So that's why it's important to build these capacities of the 21st century skills, to build the human being, build human capacity is important. Building human capacity is very, very important today, because as somebody said, building human capacity is a great thing to reach equity and equality and to empower every single human being. And by the way, one of the most important things we should focus on, instead of focusing on teaching and transmitting knowledge, that's one of the paradigm shifts we need to make in the field of education, is focusing on developing those learners, focusing on developing them as a human beings, and focusing on deliberately developing those human beings. Something that organizations, unfortunately, when we talk about, for example, business organizations have done everything they can to face the challenges. Maybe the only organization that hasn't done as much as it should is the education organization. And there is much we can get inspired from the business organizations. One of them is deliberately developing human capital. Well, this is based on a book. I'm sorry, I don't remember the writers who wrote deliberately developmental training or deliberately developmental education. Maybe we need to deliberately develop every single individual for the world we are going to face tomorrow. And as Albert Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. If we criticize the education that we have every day, that's because we kept doing the same thing forever. So I think we need to just leave some disruption in order to have innovation and to innovate. So we need to accept the disruption and live it. And the final thought I want to share with you is this quote from Elliot Massey, CEO and chair of the Learning Consortium, who said, "Working, living, and learning in the 21st century will require an expanded set of skills, competencies, and flexibilities. We must prepare for a continuous learning and reskilling process throughout our lives and careers." And thank you very much for your attention and listening.
Thank you, Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI, for your very insightful and very informative presentation about one of the most interesting topics today. Is about the 21st century skills. And as we know, that it's good to teach our learners the 4 skills: reading, writing, speaking, listening. But the most important is how students can develop those skills for what is going to be, happen outside the classroom. Because learning the 4 skills is an easy task for every teacher, but our job as educators is to help our learners to survive and how to manage and how to, develop, these skills for their career, for their personal life, for their work life. And here we have some very interesting, questions from our audience. And by the way, there are, many countries here following us, from Pakistan, Tunisia, Turkey, Morocco, Algeria, Italy, the Philippines, Russia, Ukraine, Libya, and Egypt. You see how the 2 topics, Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI and Dr. SAKALE, your topics very interesting and attracts a lot of people from different countries. So the first question is from Hidayah Khadija. She's a trainee at Serum Rabat. She's one of the very, enthusiastic and motivated, novice teachers. Her question is, how can we trigger critical thinking in our students? How can we trigger critical thinking in our learners?
Am I supposed to answer right now, Hussein?
Yes.
Well, triggering is a very good question. It means that they may have critical thinking skills, but the most important thing to do is to include these critical thinking skills in classrooms. Something that I maybe forgot to say about those 21st century skills, including critical thinking skills, is that they should not be a short course. Unfortunately, that's what happens when we teach soft skills and we teach critical thinking skills, or we teach higher order thinking skills. We use it. We just do it as a short course. This is borrowed from the Edward Freeman, who created the stakeholders theory. When he was talking about ethics, he said, when I talk to someone about ethics and I said I teach ethics, someone says this is a short course. But to trigger critical thinking skills, first we need to, as I said, explicitly talk about critical thinking skills and develop and introduce them to students. That's number 1. And number 2, develop them through activities. For example, when we talk about analyzing or evaluating as a critical thinking skill, there is a set of actions and activities that students should make, and it's not just action. It's cognitive processing, yes, that students should go through and to be critical thinkers. So it's up to the educators who have the know-how and the know-what to develop these skills through activities. Some activities like through reading activities or listening activities or writing activities,
Yes.
or even through simulations of situations, of different situations, including, for example, problem solving situations that can develop thinking skills. But if you want to learn more about them, of course, one of the articles we have written, as I said, with Professor Bouziane, a study we carried out with Professor Bouziane and Professor Hassan on critical thinking skills is accessible on the net. It just writes critical thinking skills. You write ZOHRI, Abdelaziz, or Bouziane Abdelmajid, and you are going to have access to, or Hassan Rouijal, you will have access to the article and know more about it.
Great, thank you. Here there are many positive feedback about your presentation. Abdelali Fakir said, I consider Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI an excellent example to follow. Tahiyati, great. Si Mohammed Shana said, how can we teach CT, I guess communication technology, yeah, CT, to students with low language proficiency?
Well, communication technology. I don't know if they're talking about ICT, information communication.
I guess
technology.
ICT, yeah, because he mentioned only CT, so it's ICT, information communication technology.
Well, let me tell you something about how can we teach. I think that this is a very huge question for us. Okay, so as I said, awareness is number one. Okay, and raising awareness about them is number one. Yes. And
sorry, Dr. ZOHRI, he clarified here. He said critical thinking. Yeah.
Critical. I think I answered this question when I talked about critical thinking skills. I said that okay, it's the same thing. So it's just it's as I said, the first thing that I do in my classes, for example, I talk to students about lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. We know that students today in Morocco have a problem with focusing too much on memorizing. And when you tell students, for instance, that memorizing is the lowest order thinking skill, and you explain to them why, and then you introduce the other levels or the other layers, and you move up and you say the higher order thinking skills are analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating, and you give them examples of what it means to analyze and to evaluate, and then you include them as activities in your classes. Yes. Through all the skills, integrate them through all the skills. One thing about all the skills we have talked about is that they cannot be taught separately. They should not be taught separately. They should be taught integratively. We should integrate them because when we think of leadership, for example, we cannot think of a leader who doesn't have critical thinking. See, and at the same time, we have to integrate them in our classes. So develop activities. Teachers, professors, educators should develop activities that tap on critical thinking skills. One way we can teach critical thinking skills, for example, in a language class, even with people who have low language abilities, because even those who have low language abilities are capable of transferring knowledge from their L1, for example. You see, so it's not about language. It's more than this. So one way is using, for example, what we call Socratic thinking. And Socratic thinking is something you can find even on the net. So Socratic questioning, the type of questions that are asked, that you ask your students, even students at lower levels. When I say lower levels, I mean in middle school or in elementary school. The types of questions we ask, we should go beyond the what questions, or when questions. We should go beyond them. And Socratic questioning provides a very, very good way of developing this type of skills, of critical thinking.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. Muhammad Abid asked, any tips on how to sharpen learners' curiosity and vision into the world matters? I mean, here, issues and problems.
Well, the tips, I think it's very hard first. You know why? Because it's related to something we call the power of habit. Of course, it's a title of a book if you want an interesting book, if you want to read about habits and how habits shape the way we do things. Yes. So it will not happen overnight. You're not going to talk about the importance of curiosity and you will see your students becoming curious. That will never happen. But there are some students develop curiosity at different levels, even when you talk to them about the importance of curiosity. So the first thing you can do as a professor or teacher or educator is to talk to your students about the importance of curiosity and why it is important for their future. Because if the students see a stake in what you want them to develop, they will make efforts. Everything is about interests. One of my students yesterday told me, sir, I sometimes skip some of my classes because I am not so much interested in what I am doing now, what I'm studying now. I wanted to study something else. And then we started talking. And when I talked about how what she's doing now is a springboard to what she might do in the future, and that's what she is interested in now today. She is interested in producing music. What she's interested in today she can do it later when she graduates, and she can work in the world of music, for instance. And I gave her some examples of students who worked in the artistic field. Yes, so that's one way of kind of opening their eyes to how curiosity can help them develop, or how other skills can help them develop in the future. Because sometimes what happens is that sometimes students have no idea about what the world looks like. And that's why I talked about the change. What matters to me today when I talked about 21st century skills is not 21st century skills per se. What matters to me is to create the connections between the change, the world we live in today, what we are going to go through, what we are going through today, the way we learn, the way we teach, the way we think of education. All these connections, we have to make them in order to understand how we can move to something better.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI. By the way, there are a lot of questions and everyone is interested about the 21st century skills. Yeah, but we are a little bit behind schedule. So thanks again. But at the end, there will be
I will be ready to answer them on Facebook. Don't worry. I will just take a look later at them. And
yes,
try
so
to
thanks again. Now, our second international guest speaker, Mrs. SAKALE, professor at Ibn Tofail University in Kenitra. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I highly enjoyed listening to my colleague, Abdelaziz. Congratulations for the excellent presentation.
Thank you, Settat. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let me just share my screen with you. So my presentation is entitled Pedagogical Tasks in Moroccan High Schools, Another View. Actually, interest in this area came to me as I train students in MA in a course entitled Pedagogy. So I wanted to share some of the unpublished studies that I have already undertaken. So let me just start with the introduction. Earlier, within structural linguistics, earlier trends to language learning and teaching were much more interested in the structure of language to search for answers to major dilemmas. And this came specifically because of the influence of Saussure, who said language, la langue est une forme et non une substance. And his belief and concern with Greek phonology, and also on the relationship between semiology science in general and with the relationship between signifier and signified. But with the introduction of social linguistics, there was a shift to the functions language may serve in social groups. For example, Mackay introduces the macro levels and micro levels of language. And specifically regarding language and interaction, the exploration of how a specific social situation or role relationship assigned to the learner during an activity may affect language learning, and how this is really something very, very important. So let's just try to focus on classroom interaction. This micro level of interaction is actually extremely important, because it is not the form nor the function of language we should investigate, but the correlation between activity, interaction, and how learning takes place in class. And therefore, I'm going to try to answer these important questions. How can interaction be reinforced in class during an activity? What does a pedagogical task or activity involve? And what activities do Moroccan learners in high schools find most enjoyable? To answer these questions, let's start with what is meant by interaction and pedagogical tasks in the literature. For example, Noonan gives this important definition to a pedagogical task or to interaction in general. It is through interaction that the learner cracks the code. That is, sometimes students can make repair in their speaking, in their production. That is, if we're talking about, we first start with the receptive skills, then we move on to the more demanding productive skills. So in their writing or in their speaking, they can even try through interaction to make repair and modify their spoken or written language, which is really something extraordinary. And this is how interaction contributes to the development of the learner. Also, in order to probe and search corresponding answers to questions related to interaction and how learning can take place through interaction, we have to differentiate between different types of tasks that are undertaken in class, simple and complex sequences in communication, and we have to see whether we are at the simple level of negotiation or whether we have moved to the more demanding, complex sequence of negotiation. And regarding how literature has divided tasks, we have what we call open-ended tasks and closed-ended ones. And that for open-ended tasks, they are more adequate because they have unlimited proposed answers and they produce a lot of negotiation, a density in negotiation, if you want to say. Whereas the closed ones, if it's just yes or no, and then the learner has to answer by just a very limited type of language. Now, of course, we have to evoke here Noonan and his task-based learning theory, and what he has actually added is that a pedagogical task is a piece of classroom work that involves all these: comprehending, manipulating, producing, and interacting. And since we are dealing with interaction here, we have to extrapolate also and talk about conversational analysis. But let's just see how this simple sequence and complex sequence work. For the complex sequence, we have to make it clear that at the level of triggering, students should try to begin the sequence. So by teacher's authority, they can designate the next speaker, or they can also sometimes push the learner towards making repairs as communication breakdowns occur. And of course, we have to extrapolate, as I said, the importance of conversational analysis, because this is how these micro-analytical techniques sometimes help us to answer major problematic areas regarding language learning. And for example, here we have the example of Markey, who talks about ordinary mundane conversation, but the institutional varieties of talk, like classroom talk, and that students should be taught these together with instruction. Now, for the methodology, the present study adheres to a mixed design that is it is descriptive and qualitative, and it tries to gauge learners' perceptions, teaching styles, and methods of instruction. We have, of course, the term population versus sample, and here two population samples are involved, teachers and students. For the student sample, all educational levels in high school have been involved, that is Common Core, first year baccalaureate and second year baccalaureate. And there is, I think, a chart, yes, that shows the demographic information on learners, their number, their gender, and their age range. And the total, as you can see here, is 200. About the age range and the gender, there is actually a higher proportion, a noticeable higher proportion of students aged just 15 in high school, whereas the higher proportion is situated at 16 to 17. Both science and literary students have been represented in this study with equal frequency proportions. As to the teacher sample, a total number of 40 teachers have contributed to the study, and 20 teachers, 20 of whom received the researcher as an observer in their classes. Now, for the instruments and statistical measures, the studies relied on different instruments. For example, students' questionnaires and a non-structured diagnosis interview, which has been issued, and which the aim of which was to detect teachers' perceptions and practices and problems. Now, let's just have a look at the statistical measures. Of course, there was the use of the SPSS, the statistical passage for the social sciences software, and actually the independent variables investigated have been retained to highly impact the process, and the likelihood ratio that was at hand is 0.5. The results on most enjoyable activities, we have this chart here that sums up the chi-squared values that were obtained and the probability values that were obtained. And as to, for example, the most important chi-squared values, you could see here the round table talks, conversations, guided readings. So let's just have a look at how students' perceptions are characterized here. Actually, they highly favor activities involving peer interaction. And this is again very, very important. Guided reading, games, songs, roundtable talks, and classroom conversation have all been found to be highly favorable according to the students' perceptions. Now let's have a look at the teaching material, type of activity, and type of interaction according to teachers' interviews. For the type of activities, for example, extracurriculum activities, material is just 3%. And for the type of interaction, we have here the things related to the causes why pair work activities are the predominant ones at 60%. And this, according to the teachers and what they said, large-sized classes and omission of group work sessions and time constraints are the causes behind favoring pair work. Now, of course, there is a noticeable low proportion of teachers making use of extracurriculum aids, and there is a remarkable low use of conversation. And there is a low use of group activities. And of course, as I said before, this is mainly due to large-sized classes and time constraints and omission of group sessions. Now, what are some of the pedagogical implications? Now, of course, a remarkable tendency to favor activities that entail student-student interaction. And this paves the way again and stresses the need of this socio-linguistic dimension that should be taken into account, and the importance of conversational analysis theories to language learning in class. Students seem to be in need to know the strategies of interaction, and these should be implemented. Now, there are a lot of studies that have been done, like the study that has been done in Malaysia, and that shows that a strategy training can indeed foster positive attitudes like cooperative learning behavior skills, like knowing and trusting each other, accepting and supporting one another, resolving conflicts constructively, and taking turns. And these strategies actually should go hand in hand with instruction. What is more is that if students gain this kind of self-confidence, they can even make clarification, which is a step forward in their interaction with others. And that, as Pollux, for example, found, as reported in Facets of Classroom Interaction in his study, he studied how interaction strategies have a great influence on the development of language skills in general. Things like turn-taking, initiative, topic, and activity management are all extremely important. Now, what conclusion can we draw to the Moroccan context? This means that there is an increasing need to adopt a training strategy, and that if we adopt a training strategy, there are a lot of things, and that could be fostered and that could positively affect the learners. And a resulting argument could be that the classroom is an entity that owes much of the degree of the sociability of its members to interaction, to how they interact. So we have to show them how they should do that. We have to opt for strategies. And the concluding idea and the resulting argument, as I said, is that any improvement of social and linguistic interaction could lead to and an improvement in the type of activity may lead to a greater improvement in learners' learning and achievement. And as to the references that I used, these were the references that I used. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sana Sakale, for your very interesting, very insightful and informative presentation. And here there are a couple of questions, but before that, our trainer Barak Ahlal said, thank you for sharing your study. You seem to suggest that teachers avoid group work because of large classes. Don't you think that group work is an effective strategy to be used with large classes? I repeat the question. So don't you think that group work is an effective strategy to be used with large classes?
Yeah, according to teachers' perceptions, the omission of group work sessions is an impediment, because sometimes when you are faced with a group of 60 students and you do not even have enough space to deal with the group work sessions, it's inhibiting. But of course, I agree with Professor Mbark Ahlal that it is an option, even if when we're having groups that are large, this is feasible. It depends again on the teaching philosophy of each educator.
Wonderful.
And his own perception, and we know that perception is something deeply rooted in cognition, and that it is affected by a number of things like fatigue, like age, like gender, like circumstances, like expectations, like I don't know. You see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, and here a lot of audience. Yes, ZOHRI, yes,
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just want, if you don't mind, very
yes,
quickly,
yes,
to say hi to Professor Ahlal, who is listening to us, watching us maybe through Facebook. I don't know if he's here with us, but if he is through Facebook, I just want to pay tribute to him. He is someone who has trained a lot of teachers for years in Morocco. He is a model to follow. Just say good evening, Professor, and very, very happy to have you here with us.
Yes, thanks, Abdelaziz ZOHRI. I will kill the story and let you know that next week is going to be our guest speaker. Yes, inshallah.
That's
yes.
Very good to hear.
Right.
We wish him good luck.
Yes. All right. So yeah, here a lot of people saying thank you, very informative presentation, so interesting, the best professor, wonderful. Yeah. Now there's another question. Al-Wirawi Maryam asked, how can we make pair work more beneficial to our learners? Pair work.
Again, it depends on the activity itself, because if it is an activity that fosters critical thinking, that has information gap, that helps students to interact even at this small level, it is something very good and very good to, it's very good to push students sometimes towards delivery and help them through mechanisms and through procedures and through strategies and show them. Like, for example, you could help students through a VLS, a vocabulary learning strategy, because sometimes students do not know what is the best procedure or what is the best strategy to follow to get to learn new words, etc. And this is something that could be easily done if it is a mode of interaction involving two students instead of just an individual work.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Yeah, another question. Some said here, according to your experience, which one is easier to handle or to teach, large or small classes, and why?
According to my own experience, I first started in far-fetched areas where with like groups of 50 and groups of 40 students, but then I moved to preparatory classes where I have trained future engineers, and it is then where I have encountered small-sized classes for the same time, for the first time, classes of 30 students. And it's true that with small-sized classes, sometimes a lot of activities become possible. This is very true. Then when I moved to the faculty, I came across, of course, huge numbers of students, but of course, each context has its own advantages and drawbacks. Because sometimes the faculty students are more autonomous. They just need the basic guidelines, but then they can do things by themselves, which is a pretty good thing.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, still more people thank and appreciate your presentation. Rania said, I'm proud to be one of the students of Prof. Settat. Honestly, she's one of the best professors. Yes, she is one of the best.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Samah Malouka, she's one of the previous, trainees. Now she succeeded in the teaching exam. Said, or her question is, how can we integrate low achievers in group work activities?
Of course, each teacher, as I all the time says, it has to do with how much industry you put to it, how much effort you put to it, how much hard work you bring to the class. So, for example, by having the 6 organizational powers, teachers like authority, like autonomy, like expertise, like experience, etc. By having all this, a student can do a lot. A teacher can do a lot of things through instruction. For example, they can try to divide learners into heterogeneous groups, that is, in groups that involve both low achievers and high achievers at the same time. And the leader of the group, the speaker of the group, or the speaker of the group should change each time, should not be the same person. Sometimes it's a high achiever, but sometimes it's a low achiever, so that we can give the chance to everyone to speak and through techniques of turn taking, cooperative learning behaviors, etc., supporting one another, etc.
Wonderful. Yeah, very interesting thoughts and answers. Great. So I guess this is the end of today's webinar. But before we close the day, there is a small discussion for 5 minutes. Dr. ZOHRI, Abdelaziz, and SAKALE, would you like to reflect, to add, to suggest anything? Okay, then we can call it a day.
I just want to highly thank Professor Tofail who first talked to me about Global Bath Foundation. And I also want to highly thank my MTEFL students and my LP students and my PFE students. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sana. Yes, Mr. Tofail Afkinish is one of the great English language teaching figure in Morocco.
Absolutely, he is.
Yeah, he has really made great changes, not only at Ibn Tofail University, but all of Morocco. And on this platform, I would like to say thank you so much, Mr. Tofail Afkinish. He was my university teacher or professors back to 2005. Yes, Mr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI.
Interesting.
Yes, please.
Well, just would like to thank you again for your invitation, and of course the debate about skills, whether they are speaking skills or 21st century skills, will go on, and we are ready to have discussions with everyone who is interested. You know, you have the Facebook pages of Africa Voices Dialogue or my own Facebook page, and as I said at the beginning, you are all invited to contribute to the Africa Voices Dialogue. We are having sessions in the future, and I also appreciate so much what you're doing on Global Bus Foundation, and maybe we would like to collaborate something in the near future together. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure, of course. It's our pleasure. Thank you. All right. Yes. So a lot of students talk about the program. Okay, so it's loaded, it's heavy. We study things that have no relationship with the job market. So Mr. ZOHRI, what would you what are your piece of advice to our educators? Because today, as you mentioned, that there's a change. There's a change, and there is a connection between education and business. So we have to teach learners and to equip them for getting access to the job market. So what piece of advice would you give to our educators, so as not to focus on the 4 skills: listening, reading, writing, speaking, but they have to to implicitly integrate the 21st century skills?
Yes, thank you so much for this question. First of all, you know, education is painful. Learning is painful. So let's just admit it. So we cannot have one day, one school that makes you interested in everything you're going to learn. This will never happen, I think. I believe, although they say never, but as far as I can see, that's what education is about. And unfortunately, in Morocco, we do not have some optional subjects like we have in other countries. One example, I'm sorry, maybe I'm going to take a little bit long to talk about this. One example of this, when people say, for example, Steve Jobs didn't get a college education. And no, it's not true. For example, Steve Jobs, what he did is that he didn't want his parents to spend money on college education, so he quit most classes, and he kept attending 1 or 2 classes that would help him, that according to him, help him create the computer he wanted to create. So of course education is important, but building interest is another issue. When it comes to developing what we call career readiness, this is called career readiness, okay, building career readiness skills. Well, it's not just about career readiness skills, and it's an invitation to all of us educators to think about the choices we make in terms of the content we teach, for example, and the way we teach it. Not just the content, but the content and the way we teach it, and the way we involve learners in discussions and so on and so forth. It is important to think about things that are relevant and things that are meaningful. That's how learning happens. Learning happens when the content is relevant and when the learning is meaningful. And as you said, if you are learning something, if you're teaching someone something, that's at least even if you think it's important, and it is important, and they don't see how important it is, they will not be interested. Yes. So choosing content that is relevant and choosing activities that are relevant and meaningful, and teaching in a meaningful way will, of course, raise students' interest and raise their motivation. Sir Hussein, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah, for our, for SAKALE, our doctor at Ibn Tofail University, concerning the task assigned, again, I would like to give some piece of advice to our educators about assigning the fruitful and the beneficial tasks that would, improve students, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, etc. So what kind of tasks would you, assign or suggest for learners to develop their, life skills, soft skills, 21st century skills? Yeah.
In Morocco, it has been recognized that we have moved from learning about language to using language authentically. This is how we should opt for this authenticity, these tasks that are lifelike and that cause students to manipulate the language, to produce more. You could help them through pushing them towards delivery. You could help them through fostering positive attitudes among them. You could help them through devising tasks that are clear, that the instructions are clear. You could help them by building upon previous knowledge. You could help them by trying to help them to be more autonomous, etc. And of course, for tasks, there are a lot of tasks that could be opted for, depending on students' educational level, depending on students' needs, depending on the context itself.
Thank you so much for, your participation and your fruitful, thoughts and answers. The last word, Dr. Sana and Dr. Abdelaziz ZOHRI, to your students to flourish and to succeed in their everyday life.
As future teachers, for example, especially for those of you who want to really think about teaching as a career, be yourself, be giving, and be grateful for what you have, and thankful to the people who helped you become what you are today.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks
well,
a lot.
what I want to say is that they have to believe in the future, okay, and keep doing their best. I always tell them that, okay, forget about things that you don't not control. If there is something you don't not control, it's there. Yes, of course it's there. There are plenty of problems out there, but we do not control them. So forget about the things that you don't control and focus on what you can control and do your best. And it is very, very hard, of course. Education is very hard. It's very long. We've all been through that. Yes, it takes a long time, but at the end of the day, you're going to make it and you're able to make it. And I love you all. That's it.
Wonderful. Yes, so life is a challenge, and our job is to challenge the challenge. Whenever you are, whenever you go, you will find problems, but there is the other side of the picture, the positive. So please be away from toxic people and go to positive people, because life full of issues, and your job not to talk about problems but to think about solutions. Thank you so much. This is one of the best and the most successful sessions. More than I guess more than 12 and 15 countries followed us here. Very interesting questions, feedback, and of course the great profile today we have got two professors from two different Moroccan universities. You are the best. Thanks again for accepting the invitations, and on behalf of Global Bus Foundation, we say thank you again and see you next week with another or with other guest speakers. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Hussein.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Bye for now.
Sana.
Bye,
Good having you virtually.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.